Some moments stick with you, not because they're loud or wild, but because they're so still, so quiet, you don't even notice what's starting. It's been 5 years since that moment changed everything. 5 years since my nephew's question turned my world upside down. "Auntie, if I told you what I really want, would you agree to it?" I can still hear his voice, clear as if it were yesterday. How did we end up there? How did one little yes unravel the safe life I thought I had? I wasn't chasing trouble, or craving love or attention. I had a husband, a house, and to anyone looking in, it seemed like I had it all. But loneliness doesn't barge in, it sneaks through the cracks. It's eating dinner across from someone who barely glances your way. It's the silence that stretches too long, night after night. It's waking up next to a man who doesn't truly see you anymore. Then Nathan, my sister's son, came along. He was 23, grieving, lost. In a home where I felt invisible, he saw me. At first, it felt innocent. Just little things, like him thanking me for dinner or us chatting a bit too long in the kitchen. A look that held something we both avoided naming. I told myself he just needed comfort, and I was only offering warmth. I kept saying it was harmless, until it wasn't. One stormy night, when the chaos inside me roared louder than the thunder outside, his voice cut through the darkness. "Auntie, if I told you what I really want, would you agree to it?" I should have said no. I should have stood up, remembered my vows, my husband, the life we'd built. But my heart didn't refuse. My body didn't pull away. In that fleeting moment, I whispered yes. That one yes was enough to turn my world upside down. You think you know your boundaries until they start to fade. You think you know yourself until you hear yourself say yes when no should have been your answer. I never thought one word could break the woman I believed I was. Sometimes, the wish you grant becomes your deepest regret. I used to wander these halls feeling like a shadow, not in some dramatic way, just faded, there but unseen, needed but not wanted, alive but empty. Michael and I weren't always like this. I remember when we'd talk about everything, when his hand on my back meant something, when a glance across the table made me feel safe. But somewhere along the way, between his long work hours, forgotten anniversaries, excuses, and silences too heavy to name, we lost it. We became polite strangers sharing a house, not a life. This house looked perfect, spotless kitchen, art on the walls, fresh flowers I bought every week. But it felt cold, like living in a display case. Michael drowned himself in work, late-night calls, emails during dinner, trips that stretched longer each time. When he was home, he wasn't really here, just scrolling on his phone, offering a half-smile or a nod, maybe a peck on the cheek if I was lucky. But his eyes never met mine, his hands never reached for me without wanting something else. I stopped asking. You learn to live next to the emptiness after a while. Then Nathan came to stay. My sister, God rest her, passed too soon, cancer, quick and cruel. He was all she had, so we took him in. It was the right thing. He showed up with one suitcase, eyes too weary for 23, carrying grief no young man should have to bear. That first night, he stood in our doorway, soaked from the rain, looking like a lost boy pretending to be strong. I wrapped him in a towel, made him tea, sat with him until his trembling stopped. In that moment, I truly saw him. And maybe, for the first time in years, someone saw me too. It started innocently, of course. He'd hang out in the kitchen while I cooked, asking about my day, sharing stories about his classes or the ache of missing his mom. I listened, really listened, the way no one had to me in so long. There was no plan, no big intentions, just two lonely souls filling the quiet for each other. But something in the house shifted, or maybe it was me. I'd linger in our talks longer than I should have. I'd catch his eyes searching mine when he spoke. My pulse would race when he smiled or laughed or just stood nearby. It scared me, but it felt so alive. Michael didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he never said a word. He was gone more than ever, and when he was home, he was lost behind a screen, behind a wall I couldn't scale. Nathan saw me, though. One evening, as I set the table, he looked at me and said, "Auntie, you make everything so lovely." I bet no one tells you that enough. Something inside me cracked open. It wasn't just the words, it was being seen, valued, wanted. The house looked the same, but it felt different, like the air was thicker, like every glance lingered too long, like every touch sparked something electric. I should have stopped it right there, drawn a clear line before it blurred. But when you've been starving for so long, even a little kindness feels like a banquet. Before I knew it, I was craving his company, his questions, his smiles that reached deeper than Michael's ever had lately. I told myself it was harmless, that he needed comfort, that I was just giving it. But deep down, I knew. I knew the weight of our shared glances, the warmth in our words. We weren't just filling silence anymore, we were creating something unspoken, something dangerous. After years of feeling like a ghost, I felt alive again. Seen. And that scared me more than anything. The deeper we drifted into this fragile bond, the harder it would be to pull away. Yet I kept drifting, one smile, one conversation, one heartbeat at a time. It was a rainy Saturday, the kind where the world feels heavy and blurred, and the house feels smaller somehow. Michael was home, but not really, holed up in his study as always. I'd stopped asking why long ago. The rain pattered against the windows, soft but steady. I did what I always do, cooked. It's silly, really, but cooking was my way of pretending life still had warmth, some comfort to hold on to. I had a roast in the oven, potatoes bubbling on the stove, the smell of rosemary and garlic drifting through the air. Then Nathan appeared, leaning in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, hair still wet from the shower, t-shirt hugging him just right. I glanced at him, gave a polite smile, told myself it was nothing, just him keeping me company. But my heart knew better. There was a heaviness in the air when he was near now, a pull I couldn't ignore. He stepped closer, watching me move from stove to counter, counter to oven, his eyes never leaving me. "It smells incredible," he said, his voice soft and low. "You always make this place feel like home." My breath hitched. Michael hadn't said anything like that to me in, I don't even know how long. I brushed it off with a laugh. "It's just supper," I said, trying to sound casual. But deep inside, something tender stirred, fragile and new. I reached for the salt grinder, my hand grazing his. A jolt. A tremble. It was silly, I told myself, shaking my head. But then, another fleeting touch, him passing me a wooden spoon, our fingers lingering just a moment too long. When I glanced up, his eyes were already on me. Not the eyes of a kid, not the eyes of my nephew. No, it was the gaze of a man seeing a woman. For the first time in ages, I felt truly noticed, not as a wife, not as an aunt, but as me. And that was a dangerous feeling. I stirred the pot, focusing on the steady rhythm, the soft scrape of the spoon against the pan, trying to anchor myself. But my thoughts were racing. Step back. Keep this safe. Don't let it go too far. Then his voice came, quiet, close behind me. "Auntie." I turned, and our eyes locked. He stepped closer, just enough to make my breath hitch. "Auntie, can I share something with you?" I nodded, my throat tightening. Then he spoke a wish that turned my world upside down, a wish that took my whispered yes and spun it into a lifetime of doubts. "Auntie, if I told you what I truly want, would you agree to it?" In that moment, the rain outside faded away. The cozy warmth of the kitchen turned cold. The air between us grew heavy, electric with something we couldn't name anymore. I stood frozen, knowing that whatever I said next would change everything. I kept telling myself it was just a bond, nothing wrong with that, right? He was hurting, grieving his loss, and I was just offering him something familiar, something comforting. That's what I repeated in my head, like a mantra. But even as I clung to those words, I felt their fragility. The truth was, I wasn't only giving him something, I was taking something too. I was soaking up those looks that made me feel alive again, the gentle way he said my name, like it carried weight. I craved the way his eyes lingered on me, longer than they should have. I was starving for it, and God, I hadn't realized how hungry I was. Michael's face flashed in my mind, distant, detached. I could count on one hand the times he'd touched me in the last 3 years, the times he truly saw me instead of looking right through me. Once, his love was in the way he'd tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, or how his hand would find mine under the sheets at night. Now? A nod, a faint smile, a quick peck that felt more like routine than desire. And here was Nathan, this young man with sorrow in his eyes and something else, something risky, something I wasn't supposed to want. But I did, and that was the hardest part to admit. I told myself he was just hurting, that he needed someone, that this was all it was. But the more I said it, the less I believed it. Deep down, under the guilt and the shame, was the truth: I needed someone too. I needed to be seen, to be wanted, to feel like more than a shadow drifting through my own life. In those moments when Nathan looked at me with those weary, yearning eyes, I wasn't his aunt, or a wife to a man who'd left me in every way but name. I was a woman who longed to be touched, to be chosen, to matter again. It felt wrong, selfish even, but it also felt so human. The harder I tried to push it away, the stronger it grew. I'd find myself glancing at the clock, wondering when Nathan would walk through the door. I'd pick a nicer top, just in case he noticed. I'd stay in the kitchen longer than I needed to, hoping for one more moment, one more smile, one more reason to feel alive. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. My heart would flutter when he said my name, warmth would spread through me when his hand brushed mine, and an ache grew deeper every time he looked at me like I was the only one in the room. Some nights, lying next to Michael, silent tears would slip onto my pillow, tears for what I wanted, for what I'd already let happen in my heart. I kept whispering to myself, "It's not too late. You haven't gone too far. Not yet." But some lines don't warn you when you cross them, you only realize it when it's too late. After that night in the kitchen, something shifted, or maybe I did. I started noticing the little things more: how often Nathan was near me, how he'd slip into a room when Michael wasn't around, how his presence became something I quietly anticipated. He spent more time with me, and at first, it seemed harmless. He'd hang out while I cooked, sit at the table while I marked papers or folded clothes, offer to carry in the groceries. I let him, telling myself he was lonely, that he'd just lost his mom, that this is what family does. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the whole truth. The way he looked at me, the way my breath caught when he walked in, the way my heart raced when he brushed by me, those weren't things I could brush off. And I wasn't trying very hard to. One evening, another storm rolled in. Michael called to say he'd be late again, no surprise there. I almost welcomed the quiet his absence left behind. I was in the living room, flipping through channels on the TV, trying to fill the empty hours. Then Nathan appeared. "Movie night?" he asked, his voice light but his eyes carrying something deeper. I hesitated. I should have said no, drawn the line right there. But instead, I smiled and said, "Why not?" We picked an old film, one I hadn't watched in years, one I knew would pull at the heartstrings and make the room feel cozier, closer. I told myself it was just a movie, that he needed comfort, that this was okay. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, but as the film played, the space between us seemed to shrink. A glance here, a quiet laugh there, a comment that hung in the air longer than it should have. Then came that scene, a mother and son on screen, broken, holding on to each other through their grief. I felt Nathan shift beside me. I looked over, and tears were streaming down his face, silent but unstoppable. Without thinking, I reached out, pure instinct. I pulled him close, my arms wrapping around his trembling shoulders. I told myself this was motherly, just comfort, that he needed this. But as I held him, something inside me broke wide open. He pressed his face into my shoulder, his hands gripping my sweater, his breath uneven. I didn't let go, I couldn't. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then his voice came, soft, almost a whisper. "I just wish someone would hold me and never let go." My heart pounded, and I froze. Yet my hand moved on its own, slow, almost aching, stroking his hair. Again and again, trying to convince myself this was just comfort, that I wasn't doing anything wrong. But it wasn't that simple anymore. The way his body relaxed into mine, the way my fingers lingered too long, the way my own eyes stung with something I couldn't name, it wasn't safe. I knew it. I told myself, just a little longer, just until he stops crying, just until this moment passes. But it didn't pass, it grew heavier. Then his head tilted up, our eyes locked, and in that look, something changed, something we couldn't undo. After that night on the couch, I couldn't stop thinking about him, how he'd held on to me, how his eyes had searched mine, how everything felt different now. Something unspoken lingered between us, heavy in the air, impossible to ignore. I told myself to back off, to give it room to breathe. It was just a moment of shared grief, nothing more. But space was hard to come by. Every look we shared carried a question. Every room we stepped into together felt tighter, smaller. And every part of me that had been dormant for years was suddenly wide awake. Michael was off on another work trip, a last-minute thing, as usual. I didn't argue, what was the point? The house felt hollow without him, but not quiet. Every breath seemed louder now, every movement felt like it was being watched. That night, a storm rolled in again. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and rain pounded the glass. Thunder rumbled, like a warning from some ancient story. I lay in bed, lights off, trying to hush my racing thoughts, pretending I wasn't waiting for something, pretending I hadn't checked my phone 5 times for a text that never came. Then, a faint knock at the door, so soft I almost missed it. My breath caught in my throat. I knew who it was before I moved. I should have stayed put, ignored it, locked the door tight. But instead, I got up, legs shaky, and opened it. There stood Nathan, hair wet from the rain, eyes wide and glistening, shoulders slumped under a weight too heavy for him to bear alone. For a long moment, we just stared, neither saying a word. The storm roared outside, flashes of lightning casting shadows across his face. Then, his voice, barely a whisper, broke the silence. I just want to feel loved, even if it's just once. My heart stopped cold. Every part of me screamed to shut the door, to stop this now. But I didn't move. My hands stayed on the doorframe, my feet rooted to the floor. And my heart, it shattered. Because in his trembling voice, I heard my own unspoken longing. In his eyes, I saw every lonely night, every unmet need, every piece of me that had been waiting for someone to say those words. He's hurting, I told myself. So am I. This isn't about want, it's about the emptiness we both carry. I stepped aside, just enough for him to pass. He moved slowly, carefully, like one wrong step would break us both. I stood there, hugging myself, fighting every instinct screaming at me to run. Then his voice came again, soft, pleading. Please, just hold me. That's all I need. I swallowed hard, nodded, and opened my arms. He sank into them, like it was where he was meant to be, like we'd both been waiting for this moment forever. His breath was uneven against my neck, his hands shaking as they rested on my back. My fingers, moving on their own, threaded through his hair, holding him closer than I should have. For one fleeting moment, I forgot everything, who I was, who he was, the life waiting just outside that door. In that moment, I let him feel wanted, and I let myself feel alive. Then, our lips brushed, not planned, not intentional, not even a real kiss, just the slightest touch. But I didn't pull back, not at first. And in that split second, everything I'd held together came undone. Because one moment is all it takes to unravel a lifetime. The next morning, I woke before dawn. For a brief second, I forgot what had happened. I lay there, eyes blinking open, the sound of rain now just a faint drizzle. Then it hit me, the weight of what I'd done, what I'd allowed, what I could never take back. The emptiness inside me swelled, so vast I could hardly breathe. I turned over. The bed was empty, colder than ever. Nathan was gone, of course. The house felt different, heavier, like the walls themselves were watching, like every chair and table knew my secret. I wrapped a scarf around my shoulders and crept downstairs, my heart racing, hands trembling. The kitchen light glowed softly. A coffee mug sat on the counter, half full, abandoned. But Nathan was nowhere in sight. Then I saw it, a note, scrawled quickly on the pad by the phone. Got out for a while. Be back soon. No warmth, just distance. I stared at those words until my eyes blurred with tears. I couldn't eat, couldn't think. I sat at the table, the silence roaring in my ears. Every creak of the house felt louder, every tick of the clock like a judgment. My mind kept replaying that moment, his head in my hands, his breath warm against my skin, our lips lingering just long enough to ruin us both. I told myself it wasn't meant to happen, that it was an accident. But guilt doesn't care about intentions. It settled in my chest, heavy as a rock. I tried to keep busy, folding laundry I barely saw, wiping down already clean counters. But nothing could silence the truth. I'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. Hours dragged by. The sun rose, casting a cold, sharp light through the windows as the storm faded. Nathan still wasn't back. I told myself he needed time, that he was processing, just like I was. But a deeper fear whispered, what if I'd lost him? What if I'd broken something that could never be fixed? Then, late in the afternoon, the front door creaked open. Slow, hesitant footsteps echoed. I froze, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Nathan appeared in the doorway, eyes weary, face pale, shoulders tense. We just looked at each other for what felt like forever. I wanted to say something, to apologize, to call it a mistake, to say anything to make this right. But my voice wouldn't come. No words could hold the weight of what had passed between us. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet, strained. Thank you for not turning me away. Then he was gone, up the stairs, his door clicking shut. I stood there, rooted in place, drowning in guilt, longing, and an ache I couldn't name. The house felt heavier, every sound sharper, every silence crushing. When Michael came home that evening, something had changed. His gaze lingered on me, sharp, searching, like he could sense the storm that had torn through these walls. He didn't say a word, but his eyes held questions I wasn't ready to face. And Nathan? He grew distant, cold. No more lingering in the kitchen, no more stolen glances. Just walls, thrown up fast and high. And me, alone in a house that once felt too big, now suffocating under the weight of that one whispered yes. I thought I could bear the guilt alone, that if I buried it deep enough, it might fade, lose its sharp edges. But it hasn't. If anything, it's grown heavier. Every time I see Nathan, I see the woman I became, not the woman I meant to be, not the one I swore I'd always be, but the one who said yes when every fiber of her should have said no. Was I selfish? Did I comfort him or betray him? I can still see the way he looked at me that morning, like someone clawing their way out of a wreck, reaching for anything that felt like love. And what did I give him? A fleeting moment of warmth, wrapped in a lifetime of regret. I wonder if he hates me now, or if he hates himself. Maybe we both do. Some days, I wish I could confess it all, just to let the words spill out, to someone, anyone, who could tell me how to carry this weight pressing against my heart. But who could I turn to? Not Michael, not the memory of my sister, not even the face staring back at me in the mirror. So I bore it alone. I put on a smile when I had to, spoke when it was expected, but inside, I was crumbling. The worst part, the part that jolted me awake at night, heart racing, was that a tiny piece of me, buried deep, longed for it. I missed that fleeting feeling of being wanted, that one reckless moment when I felt truly alive. And I despised myself for it most of all. Because if I could crave that once, if I could let the boundaries blur even a little, what was to stop me from doing it again? I was terrified that wasn't the last line I'd cross. Have you ever done something, not to deceive or wound, but just to feel human again? To feel a spark of warmth against skin that's grown cold? To feel noticed after being unseen for so long? To hear your own heart murmur, you're still here, still alive? I keep telling myself I didn't mean for it to happen, that I was only trying to fill a void. But a void can be dangerous. It pulls you in, makes you reach for things you shouldn't, makes you forget what's right. It tempts you to take what can never be returned. So tell me, can comfort still be innocent when both of you knew it wasn't? That's the question that gnaws at me, day after day.